Hi, finally we're back with the Verythin after a bit of a break. The problem was I couldn't get the fret wire. The fret wire that I need to get was 1.1 millimeters high and 2 millimeters wide. So it's basically a vintage style fret wire. And I had ordered some from Germany, but something went wrong with it and I never got it, so I had to order it from somewhere else. So I finally got some Boston fret wire. That's the stuff. And I get it in 5 meter coils because it's cheaper, and also when it comes in the coil it's not in flat strips, it's already been curled a bit, so generally speaking it's going to be about right for what I need it for. I've checked this, it's just under 7.25 inches radius. This neck is 7.25. What I've already done on this neck is just cut the slots deep enough to accept the fret wire tang. The fret wire tang's about 1.5 millimeters deep. These fret slots are about 2 millimeters deep, so they should be absolutely fine. I've also made sure they're wide enough to accept the tang, so that when I push the frets in, they don't bend and they just sit nicely on the frets. I'm also going to seat them with a bit of super glue. That will help them stay in the frets, but also, probably more importantly, it fills the gaps around the frets so that you will get a better sonic transfer of the vibration on the fret through the neck, and that will help with the sound of the guitar. So what I'm first of all going to do is just cut these pieces of fret wire down to the widths that I need them for each of these frets. So let's go on with that. So what I'm going to do is hold the fret wire up to the fret, take my fret cutting pliers and just cut the fret slightly longer than the width of the fret that I need. So there we go, that's the first one. And what I've got is, this is a neck rest basically, but I've drilled holes in it so that I can put my cut frets into it, and they're all numbered. So this is fret number 1, so that goes into hole number 1, and I'm just going to work my way through this now and do all of these frets. And when I've done the cutting of the fret lengths, I'm going to cut a little bit off the end of each one, so that when I come to file the fret ends down, I'm not having to file this bit, I'm just filing the bit that's sitting on the top. That's going to make it a lot quicker, and it's going to ensure that I don't damage the side of the neck at all. I don't take any varnish off the side of the neck, so I want to preserve the way the guitar is at the moment. So that's what I'm going to do. It's just going to be a bit neater, and then there will be a little bit of a hole at the end, but I'm going to fill that with some wax, so you won't see it really, unless you're really looking for it. So let's get on with cutting these frets down to size. That's all the frets done. So I've cut 23 frets, there's 22 here, but inevitably something will go wrong with one of these frets and I'll need another one. So I've got myself a spare one, so that when that goes wrong, I'll have one that I can just pick out of there. I won't have to dig out these fret pliers again and make a new cut. So next thing is I'm going to nibble down the sides of the frets with a special tool called a fret nibbler. So let's get on with that. Okay, so the next thing I've got to do once I've cut all the frets down to size, which I've done,
is trim off the tang at the end. What I don't want is to have the whole of this fret sticking out at the end, because what will happen is at the sides there'll be a bit sticking out which I'll then have to file down, and that may, well, it certainly will take off some of the varnish. So what I'm going to do is trim off the ends of the frets. So I just cut the tang off. So basically the tang will sit inside the frets but not hanging out of the end. So there'll be a bit of a gap at the end of these frets, but I'm going to fill them in with wax. So that will get over the problem of having sharp bits of metal sticking out of the side. I'm still going to have this bit hanging over the top, but I can use an angled file to trim that down, and that'll be quite easy to do. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, so I've started doing the frets. I've put 3 of the frets in, and the method I'm using is to use this fret press, and it has a caul into which you can fit different size radius cauls for the different necks. So it's got the 7.25 inch caul in it, and the way I'm going to do this is I've got a Q-tip, and I'm just going to put a bit of Vaseline on it and run it quite close to the edge of the slot, but not actually to the edge of the slot. I suppose it's about 1 millimetre away, and I'm just putting a bit of Vaseline there, and the reason for this will become clear in a second. Now what I need to do next is get some high velocity super glue. Sorry, high velocity. No. Yeah, is that right? High viscosity, not high velocity. High viscosity super glue into the slot. So I'm using the high viscosity super glue because it doesn't dry so quickly. So it gives you a little bit more time to get the frets in, because it can take up to about a minute to get the frets seated. And if you use the normal viscosity super glue, the problem is that as soon as you place your fret into the slot, it's going to glue it because it just dries so fast. So what we're going to do is just stick this, line up the cut off bits here. Oops. This is where it gets delicate. Hold it down. I'm just going to tap it into the slot a little bit with a fretting hammer, just so that it doesn't have a tendency to bend out of the slot when I'm using this fret press. And now I can offer it up to the fret press. I love saying that, offer it up. I get this thing lined up properly, and then I just turn the lever, and with a bit of luck it doesn't bend the fret and stop it going in, but it just slides into the slot, which is what it's doing, and that's seated. And what I'm going to do next is use a bit of super glue accelerator, and holding my breath because this is horrible stuff, and cameraman's going to do that as well. Just spray a bit of this in, and we'll leave it for about 20 seconds, and that'll be done. So that's how to do the fret. So yeah, it should be fine. Release the press, and there we have it, a properly seated fret. And that's how we're going to do it, and we're going to do the whole lot. So I'm going to go ahead now and do the other 18 frets, which is going to take me some time, so we'll come back a bit later on. Cheers. Okay, we've got the frets into the slots of the guitar. It went pretty well, apart from 2 recalcitrant frets who refused to go in, or which refused to go in. I was getting my grammar right. And so what I had to do is take them out, because they'd only gone halfway in, clean the slots out with the fret saws, and some sanding paper and a file to cut the top, so it was a nice sort of V going in, so they slotted in, and they've all been done. So they've all been put into the slots. I've cut the ends off. Message on my phone. Cut the ends off with this set of pliers, and you may notice actually that it wouldn't be possible to use my fret press down at this end because it wouldn't have fitted over the body. So I didn't use the fret press from about the 12th fret up, so the top 10 frets. I had to hammer them in with a hammer, which is, you know, perfectly respectable way of doing it, and a lot of people use a hammer to fret with. I don't. There's another message. I don't like to use the hammer because you can never be entirely certain that you've got it evenly in all the way across. At least that's the way I feel about it. But I think I've managed to do that with this guitar, hopefully. In any case, after we've got the ends of these frets down, we're going to fret level it all anyway, just to make absolutely certain that it's all completely level. So what I'm going to use now is another tool from Chris Allsop, which is this fret end beveling file. So it's a chunk of some kind of plastic that's not going to mark the top of the frets when you run it along, and it has a diamond grit file at a 30-degree angle set into it. So all I've got to do is run it down the guitar like this, and it will take off the ends of these frets, and it will also angle them so they're angled at the right angle at the end. And then all I've got to do is clean up the ends, round them off, and you know, then it's pretty much done as far as installation. So let's get this done. Should do long strokes like this ideally, but what you've got to be a little bit careful of at the end is not to bash the headstock, which is why I've set the file so it doesn't stick out at this end. So hopefully, you know, if we knock the headstock, we'll take a little chunk out of the binding, which isn't great. So this is the coarse grit file. It should work fairly quickly. I'm doing a little bit more down this end actually, because what I tend to find is that because there's more frets down this end, it does take a little bit longer. So not much further to go on this, so let's come back later and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. Okay, so we've got all those fret ends beveled, so they're at a nice angle to the fretboard. As you can see, they're all level to the edge of the binding. It's a consistent angle as well, which is one of the reasons I like to use that tool. The other way to do it is to use a normal sort of file and just do each one individually. But if you use that fret end beveling diamond grit file, you will get a consistent angle on your fret ends. So the next thing I'm going to do with these fret ends is to round them. I'm going to do the fret ends, and I'm going to make them, get rid of all the sharp ends and make them nice and smooth and comfortable to play. And then I'm going to take the fretboard up and we'll do a fret level. I'll put it into the fret jig and we'll do a fret level. So that's the next job. Right, so what I'm going to do now is round off the end of the frets, and I'm going to use this tool. You know what, I think this is another one from Chris Allsop, I'm not sure, I think it is. It's a fret end tool, diamond grit again, rounded at the edges so it doesn't mark the fretboard. So I'm going to do this for all the frets, but I'm going to just show you the first one. So what I'm going to do is kind of hold it pretty much flat to the fret, just a maybe 5-degree angle, and just do a couple of strokes like that. And then I'm going to go around the other side and do the same. And when I've done that, I'm going to angle it about 45 degrees and round over the top, going downwards like that. And I'm going to do the same on the other side, obviously. And that's got rid of the sharp edge, which is great. Let's do it another couple of times. So I'm going to do that for all of these frets. So that kind of gives you like a rough rounding, I suppose. But when we've done the fret leveling and we're going over this with abrasives to polish it up, we'll be polishing up the ends of the frets as well, so it will become nice and round and shiny, rounder and shinier than it is now. So I'll get on now and I'll do all of these frets and I'll be back in a minute. Thanks. Right, so we've got the frets in, all done, and I've put the guitar into my fret leveling jig, which ensures that the neck is completely flat. And I've also done the fret leveling with my leveling beam. I think this was from Crimson Guitars, I think, and that's completely flat, so run it along and that just levels all the frets. Did find some anomalies with this neck while I was doing that. There's a couple of frets here which, although they're completely seated flat against the fretboard is a little bit distorted. One of them's here, and that's at the point at which well, the neck kind of joins the body at this point, so it's not unusual to see a little bit of distortion here. In fact, you'll find even with relatively young guitars there'll be a fret around about 12, 13, 14 which is higher than the others, and I don't know the physics of this, but for some reason or other where the neck joins the guitar, that seems to create some stresses which causes the wood to bulge up a little bit. So I've had to file down this particular fret a lot to get it within the ballpark before I did the general fret leveling, and the same with this one as well. I don't know why this one in particular. Again, I thought it wasn't seated properly, so I took it out and I put another fret in, exactly the same. It's just a bulge in the neck. It's a 57-year-old guitar. These sorts of things happen. So what I've had to do is file those two down a lot more than the others and then do the general fret leveling. The other thing is that when we get to the join, the neck falls away a little bit. Now that's not really a problem, and in fact when you're doing fret leveling you do want to fall away round about here because it helps to stop fret buzz. This has probably got slightly more fall away than you'd want, you would normally put in with a fret level, but nevertheless I'm fairly confident that it's going to play okay, because between one fret and the next they are level. They all line up within the within an area. They're all level to each other, so we shouldn't have any issues with that. If there are any issues, we can iron them out when we've had the strings on and we can find out what's going on and any particular areas of concern. So what I'm going to do now is use with most of the frets I think I'm going to use the Chris Allsop fret crowning tool. This is the 2mm wide one, which is the width for these particular frets. Basically all you do with this is get it on the fret, run it along, and when you've got just about a very thin line on the top of the fret, then it's done, and that one is done. I mean, because that one was pretty much there anyway. This one There's a little bit more this end to do, and that one's done as well. So these are going to be pretty quick, except for these two. I've had to take quite a lot off. I'm going to use this file for that, and I'm going to get most of the rounding done with that file, and I'll finish off with this one so that it's got the same profile as the other one. So I'm going to get on with that, and I'll see you when I finish doing it. Okay, so what I've got to do now, I've got all the frets done, everything's in, it's all polished, levelled, polished, ends smoothed off, no sharp edges. So earlier on I said I've got these holes at the ends of the frets because I cut the tang off the bottom of the frets before I installed them. So what I've got to do is fill these holes in with this wax filler. It's a furniture product, and the way this works is you just heat it up and put a bit in the gap that you want to fill. And then when it's dried, you can scrape it off. Use a cloth to get the residue off. So that's filled in the gap at the end there, I think. Has it? I think it has. Yeah. So that's filled in. So I'm just going to go along there and do